Abby, this is Vito. I have my mic unmuted. Can you hear me? You'll have to do it in chat to confirm because I'm not getting any audio back. Terrific. We have half of it fixed, right?
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Hear them, I don't know.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, testing.
Okay, testing. Okay, testing.
Abby, if you can hear me, what I'm noticing is there's always someone's mic active. When you just did the testing, the on the screen here that shows the participants, you were totally outlined as if you were still speaking. I'm not sure if that's the technical problem. And I also noticed Roger's iPad was lit up constantly, even though he wasn't speaking. So I don't know if that's what's blocking it, because when you actively speak, we hear you. Other than that, we're not hearing anything.
Vito, I don't know if you can hear me, but actually that outline around your name is on constantly as well.
So Roger, now it was yours on constantly. Let's see what happens if no one speaks, if mine stays lit up.
Okay. Makes sense.
As I was saying, there will be a meeting that's more focused on fisheries things in weeks, so we'll let you guys know. Keep you updated on this. new process goes on.
Okay.
We have the, why do we have?
Speaker.
So, sorry, whose sound is that coming?
Does output, back. So this is, why is it still?
You need to turn your volume.
I have an idea. Okay.
So, Dan mentioned that show with a Massachusetts seafood pavilion like we've had the past 3 or 4 years. So there's been a lot going on there. Wendy's been going event to event to event, basically. So I just want to
So I
highlight
muted all
that
of
all
those
that's
mics.
going on. And then this week, the next round of the food security infrastructure grant opportunity was released. So that's available. I'll leave this handout maybe over there. And people can use this to get to the opportunity. I think it's between $7 and $8 million this round, which is less than it's been. But DMF will also send out an email to our entire listserv about this. And it closes, applications are due by May 4th. So I'll leave these out. So I just wanted to highlight that. And those are my updates.
Hey, Vito and guys, can you, and Roger, can you hear us now? I'm just trying to use it through the computer.
Yes, hear you perfectly. I heard story.
So we're just gonna walk the computer
Yeah.
around.
Yeah, I can hear as well.
Okay, we solved it. Thank you. Sorry for the troubles.
All good.
Yeah, I can put my phone, look at my steps. You're right, Ed.
Offshore wind. So Pat's gonna go over there. I'm gonna share his slide.
Totally fine.
Okay.
Great, thanks. Yeah, should we put that right there? Just going to give a couple of quick updates today on recent federal actions that have been taken against offshore wind developments. Are people seeing my slides there? Oh, yeah. Next slide, please. Current offshore wind project status. There has been quite a bit of movement, and then recent milestones that we've achieved that have been achieved recently in offshore wind.
We're just projecting the agenda from it, so. There you go, okay.
So back before Christmas, the Department of Interior and BOEM suspended all 5 active leases that were being worked on. The federal argument was essentially referenced Department of Defense and Department of Defense classified reports that cited a lot of wind turbine radar interference or potential attacks that could come from within wind turbine areas. That created a 90-day period for the U.S. government to work with leaseholders and state parties to come up with solutions. Almost immediately after, the developers, one by one, sued the federal government. And within 21 to 42 days of lost work, they received preliminary injunctions or preliminary stays. The legal arguments that they used in court varied, but essentially they argued that they were already generating power. They had already consulted through the permitting and BOEM process on a lot of these issues, that suspensions would cause irreparable harm, and that the timelines with which they have contracts for their very specified installation vessels required them to stick close to those the projected construction timelines. The judges that weighed in on these cases found that the rationale the federal government used was fairly pretextual for the overall dislike of offshore wind. That significant harm without an injunction would be caused. That the decision by the government was arbitrary and capricious, and that insufficient evidence of an emerging threat or adversarial technologies was seen by the judges who did have access to the classified reports. And you can see there on the table that each of the 5 projects lost at least 3 weeks, but they are now back on the water. In doing a deep dive into these issues and these technologies, I did find that there is an existing wind turbine radar interference mitigation working group, including members from DoD, DOE, FAA, NOAA Fisheries, Department of Homeland Security, BOEM, and they contract with some of the best and brightest minds in the country, MIT, Lincoln Lab, Sandia Lab, Berkeley Lab, to do research on wind turbine radar interference. I actually was on a call with them a couple weeks ago. Very high level stuff, but we shared some interesting information, and I'll probably be privy to their 2025 annual report, which will not be made public for certain reasons. It doesn't really have a website it can go to anymore, is why. So that was really interesting. They are interested in doing projects in offshore wind farms to address some of the concerns that were raised by the federal government. Next slide. You may have heard last week, actually it was this week, that the Department of Interior and Total Energies, which is a French energy developer, renounced 2 offshore wind leases, one off of New Jersey, one off of North Carolina. These were lease areas that were awarded to Total Energies back in 2022 for the total of $928 million was the award. Total Energies agreed with the Department of Interior and BOEM that they will renounce these 2 lease areas. The leases will be terminated. They will then invest $928 million in 2 oil, natural gas, or LNG projects in the Gulf of America and in Texas this year. They will be reimbursed up to that value by the U.S. government for the investments they make in U.S. oil and gas projects. And they also pledge that they will not pursue any new offshore wind projects in the U.S. I've been doing quite a bit of reading on the actual meanings and the background of all this, and it kind of it runs the spectrum between this is a really good investment and decision based on the federal climate towards offshore wind for Total Energies versus this is a unlawful, payback using taxpayer dollars. So to be determined if this will be a strategy for Interior or the federal government moving forward, but this has implications for future undeveloped leases, we think. Next slide, please.
He has his hand up.
Oh, sure. Yeah, do we want to?
Oh, but put a pin in that, because there's something I want
Okay.
to circle back to that is on our plate.
Yes. Just an update on the existing projects. We have South Fork that's operational, 5 projects that are under construction, a handful more that are in their planning and permitting phase that we don't expect to be moving any further at this point, and then Gulf of Maine. I'll give you some more detail in these upcoming slides. Next slide. Vineyard Wind, they did on March 13th finish their final blade replacement. They're still doing work out there. They lose their jackup vessel, their install vessel on March 31st, but they are fully built out at this point. They just have some commissioning left to do. Empire Wind over towards New York City, they have all of their foundations, their monopiles in. Their offshore substation was delivered and lifted onto the foundation back in mid-January. They're commissioning it right now. They're doing cable protections, and they expect to start installing turbines in 2026 here. The Ørsted project. So we know South Fork has been operational for over a year now. Revolution Wind has 60 of the 65 turbines installed right now. They have completed their inter-array cable campaign. They are finishing up their final cable protections within the wind energy area, and they are commissioning both of their substations right now. They have started delivering power to the grid. That's another one of our big milestones. The same day that Vineyard Wind finished their project. Sunrise Wind, the lease area to the bottom there, has about half of their monopile foundations installed. And their big effort right now is the export cable, which is running from about halfway down Long Island to the lease area to their high voltage direct current substation that is currently being commissioned. The export cable is about halfway there. There are a slew of new cable mattresses that are covering that either temporarily or permanently. So that QR code in the bottom right is a list of those QR codes or of those mattress locations. And for anybody with a plotter that might fish out in that area, and if they might want to go to that site and download those. Another new development, actually, even though Revolution Wind still has 5 turbines to install, the install vessel, which is home ported in New London, is actually going to Sunrise Wind and actually got there at about 2 a.m. So their Sunrise Wind will be installing turbines this spring. And the install vessel went to the turbine in the top right. There you can see a little red dot there. So that's interesting. We're still TBD on when Revolution Wind finishes the last 5. Next slide here. Yeah, sorry, that's a messy one. I can give people a better idea of what those specific projects look like. Gulf of Maine, we're kind of in a holding pattern here, considering the federal climate, but we have had communications with both Avangrid and Invenergy, both of which have 2 lease areas. Their communications plans, at least for Avangrid, are available online, and there's been a small level of interaction between the state and the developers there. And then moving on to milestones. So as I mentioned, a couple Fridays ago, Vineyard Wind finished their last turbine, and Revolution Wind sent power to the grid on the same day. And then actually that night we saw we saw the record level of wind power generation for the New England region was met that night when Revolution started delivering power to the grid. Since then, we've had a couple nice breezy days, sunny days, and St. Patrick's Day was actually the day where we set a new record for wind generation. That's both land-based and offshore wind, but that is expected to continue. The bottom right there is the generation of all renewables on that given day. So you can see a midday solar peak in yellow and wind in purple. And we've had a couple days where wind doesn't even drop below 1,000 megawatts for the entire day. So that's a function of Vineyard Wind finishing out their commissioning and Revolution Wind sending power to the grid. We also hit the second highest ever renewables generation on that same day, probably as a function of wind and hydropower is actually those 2 little bumps in teal on the bottom left. We got hydropower from Quebec. So, and then I think that's it for today. Yep.
Yeah, so just an observation on the attentive energies or buyout, for lack of a better term. A number of us now, a couple of years back, tried to press the federal government, particularly related to funding for fisheries mitigation, but also for us for port infrastructure funding and that kind of thing, because there was a shortage. That, for God's sake, at least use the funds that you've already received from the offshore wind developers. You've got $7 billion from these lease areas. Why don't we start there? The argument that we got back, particularly from Republican Commerce staff, was nope, that money's in the Treasury, it's gone. That is not an opportunity for it. Now, I'm not foolish enough to count on consistency or precedent, but if they did reach back, and that's the claim, the administration's claim is that they used the previous lease proceeds to buy out these leases. It's at least an argument to say, okay, so there is some mechanism, and if Congress doesn't object to that move, then at some point in the future, an argument could be made that some of those revenues from 2022 and 2023 might be available for fisheries mitigation or some of those other needs. So I thought it was kind of nuts, but if in fact we can use it potentially as an argument in the future that some of those funds might be available, it may be another administration conversation, but it was, I think, one sort of piece of that transaction that I thought was interesting.
I think their current claim is they are finding that money out of the DOJ settlement fund. Because to your point, the money that from all energy that goes through Honor, which is a part of Interior, goes into the general fund. And some of it is sequestered for the Land and Water Conservation Fund, kind of an accounting mechanism.
Oh,
But-
because
but that's
the
a- that-
Interior Secretary's first comment was that it was from the funds set aside, from the leases, that they were using the same source. Maybe they realized that that argument doesn't.
So that's what I heard is out of the DOJ settlement fund, but Brad, I don't know if you heard any more.
I was reading some legal analysis on this, and first of all, the mechanism for taking the money from Treasury to give back to as a reimbursement doesn't exist because it would have to be allocated by Congress,
Well,
I
that's
believe.
right.
Right.
That's for certain articles.
So, and there isn't actually a published settlement that you can find anywhere in Federal Register or anything on this yet. It's really just a press release that is holding up this agreement. Who knows if that will, be the final case, but I think your point is appropriate that this does potentially create a new mechanism for paybacks or mitigation or absolutely. Yeah. So it is definitely something to keep an eye on for sure.
When updated, if there's any more information on this specific.
Yeah.
Mechanism of funding that might be useful.
Acknowledging that getting information out of Interior and BOEM might be difficult. Yep.
Yeah, because the ultimate bumper sticker is the federal government spending $928 million on oil and gas exploration, right? That's all that's happened, right?
And getting another country's energy developer to do it.
Yes, right, but it's a federal expenditure, basically.
Yeah. I was going to put a link to the press release in here from Interior, but I wouldn't wish that reading on anybody.
Dan, and if folks online, then we'll go to Ed in the room, and if folks online, if you want to get in, record, feel free to raise your hand and I'll know.
So Brad, just two clarifying questions. The vineyard wind turbines, are they all spinning? Are they all producing, or are some of them still in testing mode?
Some of them will still need to be commissioned. I don't know about testing mode. But yeah, they all have the new blades that didn't come from the plant with
So can you
manufacturing.
say what percentage of the 62 are fully functional?
I could probably get that out of them. Yeah, I personally don't know right now.
And then my second question is just from your perspective, did the Revolution development go up faster than Vineyard Wind?
Yes. Yes, without the blade manufacturing.
That probably was what
Hiccup.
set back Vineyard Wind is the.
Yep, and I could give you within 5 minutes a timeline of how fast those 60 went up.
That's all.
But Brad, it's also true that they shifted that installation vessel from Redwood to Sunrise to start Sunrise development, right? So that if there is another attempt by the federal government, that the damages will be greater,
That's a good theory.
right?
I did ask.
Because it's the same developer, right? They're just shifting to at least get Sunrise going, thereby making it harder to stop in the future.
If they had that capability, these turbines, the tower nacelle blades that are going to that Sunrise site aren't necessarily the same. They're coming from different parts of the world, but I did ask that question for clarification as to why, and my Ørsted contact was a little wasn't willing to share that information just yet. It's a good theory, though.
I'm curious about the output statistics. Do they come from the developer or do they come from, a public utility?
Good question. Yeah, that's called ISO New England, ISO-NE.com. It's the ISO New England is the grid operator that essentially looks at how much energy we'll need for tomorrow and next week and kind of picks from different, this is my understanding, please somebody correct me, picks from different energy sources. We have nuclear as the base load, then natural gas, and then on really cold, no solar days, we might need to bring oil into the mix, but they report out on what goes into the mix every single day, almost minute by minute. And then you can go back and look at those statistics.
So you can look at those statistics specifically for Vineyard Wind and Revolution?
No, that's the problem. It's just wind in general. So we're getting wind from Maine, from New Hampshire, and offshore. That said, we know over the past couple of years what the maximum from land-based wind was. And so when we see new records being hit and new additions to the grid for offshore wind, we can kind of put two and two together.
So they operate our grid.
ensure that there's, as Brad was saying, reliability and adequate power sourcing.
But there's still no, like, way to exactly monitor wind or.
Not in real time, no. They do report out quarterly, actually monthly. There's a website where you can see monthly power production by wind farm. You can go look at South Fork's monthly production. It's a federal website, but that lags like by 6 months, I think.
So the ISO New England dispatches all generation onto the grid, so they know where everything is coming from. They do know what's public and not, or whether we have to go down and search it. I work with a guy who's an energy, because I'll actually ask him how far deep in NEPL information you can get to actually try to find actually specific generation sources, because I don't know, but I can ask.
I think we should keep moving. A number of other updates. Thank you. All right, so we just wanted to open up to any commission members have updates they want to share with the group, 1 to 2 minutes. Okay, we'll make a little time for this at future meetings too, so just know it'll be here if you want to share something. Okay, commission updates, just really quickly. The annual report is still in progress. It's getting some final review. We're hoping for today. It didn't work out timing wise, but I think we're going to send it via email for your review. So that's coming. Okay, we're going to hear 2 focus group updates from the port profiles group and flounder processing. And then we'll hear more from the economic development and Story, do you want to go?
Yep. And these will be quick. You're going to pull the slides up. I forget which one's first. Okay. Port profile update. So the work is ongoing right now with Urban Harbors Institute. So essentially, where they're analyzing the survey data, DMF is providing the fisheries data by municipality, and we're putting that all together in the individual port profiles, which are being redesigned by Urban Harbors Institute for readability and for the accessibility standards that we now have to meet in state government, so that the report will be readable by screen readers and things like that. But it'll be looking good. And we will have the full report and the individual profiles released later in the spring. So the goal is to be done by the beginning of June, and probably at your next meeting, we'll have the report to show you. Whether we print it by then or we have it online, we can give you an overview of some of the findings. So we're working hard, and that'll be done in a couple months. Okay, yeah, you've seen this timeline, it's the same. We're on schedule to get it out late spring 2026. Thank you.
I understand that this focus group is gonna sunset.
Yeah, I think this focus group sunsets, and now the port profile in 2 months will be available to everyone to use as needed, and we'll take it from there.
Thanks.
Yeah, it was really helpful to get those survey questions fine-tuned for round 2. And then the flounder processing focus group hasn't met since the last meeting, I don't believe. But since then, we've been doing a bunch of work behind the scenes, particularly on the marketing end. So suggestions coming out of that focus group were to engage on the marketing side, to engage a public relations firm to work on this flounder issue and get it, figure out what can be done regionally or locally to promote flounder. So Wendy's been engaging with a couple different public relations firms, one that Roger clued her into, and then another one. So we're waiting on proposals from at least one public relations firm to do something like a 3-month engagement with chef ambassadors and a media event to raise awareness on local flounder. So that's coming along. I think the focus group will get back together relatively soon to talk about that idea and help fine-tune what that looks like. And then in terms of the processing and infrastructure needs, Wendy and others on our staff have been making calls to processors throughout the state, trying to determine, what the barriers are for processing. We're finding a lot of it is demand, spinning up some of the capacity, you need the demand. So we're kind of focusing on that marketing, that demand side to start. So we'll get back together within a month on that. Aubrey? Yeah, that's it.
For the marketing, has there been any interest or push to get more flounder into school systems? And the reason why I ask is I just recently learned up in Maine that they are using flounder to make like a fish tater tot, essentially mixed with potato in schools. Like,
Yeah.
it's really effective.
Yeah.
And so I was just thinking how kind of seems odd to me, fish and potato combined into like a tater cake, but maybe kids are into it. And so I was just wondering if like, if when you're talking about the volume or demand, if it got into schools and became more of a regular, I wondered if that would help with.
That would certainly help. And that's one of our goals, working with Mass Farm to School and others to try to find ways to get into schools. So yeah, that's part of it.
Oscar has a pollock in and you'd never know it was fish. So anything like going to the schools.
Where was
it
that?
doesn't- It's in Alaska.
Alaska.
I'll send you a link to it.
Okay.
It's really good.
Okay, good.
Anything to get them to eat it.
Right.
It tastes like fish though. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, good. Anything else? Good. Thanks.
The spring before next. Arlanta, could you bring that to Jane?
Everybody's friend. Okay.
Okay, yes, as Dan introduced, really excited to have you here today to talk about.
Thanks.
Yes.
Is that the right?
Okay.
Can you just click on the next one? I'm wondering if I think it's not the right one. No, you can just close that down. Just do it without. Yeah. Yep. Sorry about that. So thank you. I really appreciate Commissioner you having me here today, Director. I am JJ Bartlett, and I'm founding president of Fishing Partnership Support Services. And we're a nonprofit company, for those of you who don't know us, who have been improving the health, safety, and economic security of commercial fishermen since the mid-90s. And so I just had my 30th year anniversary last week. And I've been working since then with the Massachusetts Fishermen's Partnership. So the Massachusetts Fishermen's Partnership, as you know, is an umbrella organization. And we still work real closely with Ed, Angela, and many of your organizations were part of MFP when they decided in the mid-90s that there was a need for a health plan for fishermen. So I helped start and I ran that health plan for about 15 years. And then we moved to a new model that I'll talk about, which is more of a human resources agency for the fishing industry. Once statewide reform came along and national reform, we didn't need to have insurance for fishermen in Massachusetts anymore. So we could get out of that business, but there was a big gap that needed filling. And so I'll talk about that in a moment. But I just wanted to start by saying, as a human resources department for the fishermen, what that means is I'm here with a lot of my bosses in the room and I have to talk about them. And that's awkward. So my presentation is geared to the people who aren't fishing, and with apologies for the fishermen here who already know and are involved with what I'm about to say. So I always start, we're the only nonprofit like this in the country. And I get asked why we exist. Why do you need a nonprofit to support a workforce? And I always start with how much we need fishermen. And I know Story's going to be talking about that later, so I won't get too much into the economic impacts. But I always, as a landlubber, feel like I have to thank the fishermen in the room for risking their lives every day to feed us, and for bringing millions and millions of pounds of fish to our tables and to our families. For creating a blue collar workforce that just exists up and down the coast of Massachusetts that doesn't exist in many other states. For creating economic security, someone's got to pull. There are 130,000 jobs in Massachusetts, seafood jobs. Someone's got to pull the fish out to make those jobs work. And I just am so appreciative of all the work that you do. And, we as a society obviously owe the food producers a huge debt of gratitude. We also know that we need more fishermen. The Bureau of Labor Statistics is showing that we need thousands and thousands of more fishermen each year. Not only has there been a graying of the fleet where young fishermen have not been entering the workforce, but we just don't have enough protein in this world, and we have more fish than people are eating. This is exciting times where we need to make sure that the next generation comes in just as strongly as prior generations have. The sad news is that fishermen really need our help, is why we exist as well. And that's why I'm here today. It's not just fishermen either. Many independent workers, and there's a certain group that we call workers without a net. And they've been left behind by the 21st century. So I'd like to define workers without a net, like fishermen. I'm going to define by three characteristics: high rates of pain and injury on the job. Basically, jobs where you work with your body. High rates of pain and injury on the job, but you don't have access to paid leave. You don't get sick days, you don't get vacation days. And the third criteria is you don't have job security. If your captain calls you and you say, "I'm not coming out," and you say that 2 or 3 times, maybe you're not a fisherman anymore. And this differs greatly from the majority of workers in this country who work for large employer groups, who can have a number of sick days and vacation days and tell their boss every day that they're not coming to work. So when you look at these groups and you add the fact that many are independent workers as well. So fishermen are dependent on forces outside of their control in order to earn a living, right? So weather, for example, no control over weather, price of fuel, price of bait, price of fish. Regulations is real important for this meeting. When things, new regulations, when regulations change, when it can be incredibly stressful. Now, when you layer that stress on top of the fact that it's one of the lowest paid occupational groups in the country, there's another layer of stress. You factor that in with how dangerous the job is, particularly with the lack. Right now, we are zero funded at the federal level for safety training for the most dangerous job in our country. Our waters are the deadliest in the country. And again, safety training has been zeroed out. Half of fishermen have been either hurt on the job or witnessed something so traumatic none of us would want to see. Death, fire, flooding, half of fishermen. So when you layer all that on top of each other, fishermen are the workers in this country and in Massachusetts who are the lowest paid, who are among the lowest paid, who are the most likely to die on the job, the most likely to go without health insurance, the most likely to die of an opioid overdose, and the most likely to die by suicide. The other workers in those categories, by the way, construction workers, fishermen, farmers, forestry workers, I'm sure you'd say it's very similar. For jobs that have more female workers, more urban jobs, you're talking about home health aides. You're talking about food service workers. And it doesn't matter if you're lifting up one of my heavy relatives to take care of the bed sores on their back, or you're throwing a net over your shoulder. If you tear your rotator cuff in either of those jobs, you can't take a day off. You got to learn how to do it with your other hand. And that's just a nature of the work. I just want to bring this forward because fishermen don't have stress problems. Fishermen don't have substance use disorder problems. Fishermen have pain problems, mental and physical pain problems. And the other problem that fishermen have, and many of these workers without nets have, is there's no support systems. The average person in this country, as I said, gets their healthcare coverage through an employer group, and that employer group has a human resources department that is spending $1,500 per employee per year on human resources to make sure that they're doing their job and they're doing it safely, to make sure that if they need tetanus shots, they get tetanus shots, to make sure that they have healthcare coverage if they need healthcare coverage. There is none of that. That would be a $10 to $15 million investment just for the fishermen of Massachusetts. If all the fishermen punched the clock in one corporation before they went out to sea, they'd have a $10 million HR department taking care of them. As independent workers, they don't get that investment in human capital. We have to find it through other sources. The price of the health and safety of fishermen is not built into the price of the fish. The fishermen need to be paid more. I had a nice video of Al that I'm not going to show now. But it just picture Al and it was great. Fishing. So we became the human resources department for the fishing industry. That's what Al was talking about in the video. We staffed offices in port towns. We have offices in Gloucester, Plymouth, New Bedford, out in Chatham, and just opened our first office outside of Massachusetts in Point Judith, Rhode Island. Our model is to staff each office with members of fishing families, and then we aggressively train them as community health workers. So they know the needs of the fishing industry because they come from fishing families themselves, and they tell us what those needs are, programs that could support those needs, and then we provide as much training as we can so that they have deep healthcare and safety training. So we have three fundamental pillars, like I said. One is community health. Under our community health model, we really still focus on getting, we don't have an insurance product anymore. We don't sell insurance anymore, but our navigators can help anyone sign up for healthcare coverage at any time. And that's critically important for the fishing industry and industries like it, because again, nothing's easy for fishermen. The system is designed for people like me who wear suits and ties and sit in front of their computer all day and have the same income every year. But when your income fluctuates, half of fishermen are eligible for different programs every year. You know, you can be having a bad year and go and catch 3 tuna, and all of a sudden you're kicked off Medicaid because you made too much money, but you don't know it because you're out at sea. These are the type of things that our navigators help fishermen work through. We do preventive services, as I mentioned. We'll bring tetanus shots. We'll bring dental cleanings right to the docks, right to the harbors where the fishermen live and work. And then, again, dealing with the physical and mental pain issues, we approach substance use disorder from a bunch of different angles. Now, this is something I want to be very, very careful and clear about. Again, the fishermen have have issues with pain. The job comes with pain. Of course, if they don't work, if fishermen don't work, they don't get paid. Of course, they're prescribed pain medicine. 10% of people who are prescribed opioids develop substance use disorder. More fishermen in this society have pain than the average people. 10% of a higher number is going to be a little bit higher. That's all it is. Fishermen are in jeopardy because of the job that they do. Another way of saying it is when I ran the health plan, 2 things were true. Fishermen were 3 times more likely to be in treatment. Now, that's something we spend a lot of time on still. Recovery coaching, admission into recovery programs, supporting folks obtaining treatment, general opioid use, and naloxone distribution education. But when we ran the health plan, we saw that 3 times as many fishermen were in treatment. But the numbers were that about 3% of the Massachusetts population was in treatment, and about 6 to 9% of fishermen were in treatment. So if you look at the numbers, 90% of fishermen are saying, I never have and never will have substance use disorder. Why is everyone treating me as I do? It's the vast majority of fishermen, just like the vast majority of any other group of workers in this country, does not suffer with substance use disorder. It's a very small percentage. We don't want anyone to. It's too many. But that's where the stigma comes from. So when we finally realized this through the data, we were able to work with our navigators to start working with fishermen as first responders at sea. Because it was true. When we would go to a vessel and they would say, but we don't have opioids on our vessel. Why would we carry Narcan? And that's true. 90% of the fishermen don't. Well, it's the same reason that you carry all sorts of other gear. It's because ambulances don't go where you fish. and you're going to come across another boat that needs it. And so fishermen agreed, and they started as non-traditional first responders carrying Narcan, and it is working. It's about a fisherman is saving about a life a month now with Narcan. And sometimes it's at sea with other vessels. Oftentimes it's a recreational vessel. Sometimes it's at CVS. Sometimes it's on the Southeast Expressway. We had a fisherman who was the first on the scene, and the fisherman had Narcan, and the state police officer didn't. This is, again, just pulling over someone that was pulled over on the Southeast Expressway. I think it's been an incredibly important and powerful model, having fishermen engaged in the community to help themselves and to help others. I want to move on to another sort of difficult issue, like I said, dealing with mental pain. So the example that I'm going to give is recovery efforts. So we've been talking about the Lily Jean today, but I'm going to talk about one that's a little less sad. We had 3 fishermen who went overboard a year or 2 ago in Nantucket Sound. They thought they were going to die. One of the fishermen couldn't swim, and they made their way to a buoy, and they didn't die. And they clung to the buoy until the Coast Guard found them, and they brought them ashore. That's the type of story we like to hear, right? And that's sort of the end of the story prior to fishing partnership. The Coast Guard gets them to shore, says, okay, you're good. But, what we've learned over time is that their truck keys are at the bottom of the ocean, their wallets at the bottom of the ocean, the phone with their partner and, their sponsor and their primary care physician, bottom of the ocean. They don't have sealskins to go out next. They don't have keys to their house. So the Coast Guard now asks if they can call us, and our navigators will show up and start working on those issues. When it's a bigger loss, like the Lily Jean, there are ongoing weeks, months, years long interventions that we need to do. And I'll get to that in a moment. But the reason I bring this up under mental health is that, you can imagine, those 3 fishermen thought they were going to die all day. So did their parents. So did their families back home. The families were getting called saying, we don't know where your fishermen are. That's a lot to go through. And the way to prevent future illnesses is to address that with grief counselors and trauma counselors in the moment. And we can do that. We bring those right to the fishermen. We have safety and stability trainings that we do, and first aid and trainings that we do. They're all run by fishermen and other mariners. They're hands-on. We light fires, put them out. We light flares, plug leaks, and we do these trainings from Maine border all the way down to the Carolinas. We have quotes from people who've saved lives through CPR and safety training, just like through with the other work. Here's someone I'm making. All the guys take the course. I had to do CPR today on a 5-year-old next door, pulling him out of the pool. Someone else saw a ferry down Long Island Sound run over a skiff and was first on the scene to save their life. We try to get safety equipment to fishermen. When we started, less than 10% of fishermen were wearing life jackets. After a few years of giving out life jackets and having fishermen be able to try them on, half of the boats that the Coast Guard boarded had fishermen wearing life jackets in the past 3 years. We focus on economic security as well. We have programs like professional development, training fishermen into the industry, financial planning, access to resources, helping fishermen apply for some of the grants that you've mentioned, if that can be of help. And then economic assistance. And this is, again, something I want to talk about in relation to the Lily Jean and all the other disasters. We've lost 13 fishermen in a few weeks. losing double digits lives in a year is sadly not uncommon. But I'm here to tell you that Alaska, the show with the deadliest catch named after it, has gone 2 12-month periods with no deaths. We don't have to accept this. And a lot of it's out of the hands of this room. A lot of it's around regulations that are crazy and make fishermen do nutty stuff. But we can train fishermen. We can have safety training. And I think I'll talk to you afterwards. That's our recommendation. Ongoing safety trainings that are dedicated safety trainings in Massachusetts are ongoing dedicated safety trainings in every state. Just, the availability of the safety trainings would make a huge difference. And then, when there are instances afterwards, like I said, it's been incredibly important that we step in. It's not just the Lily Jean. We have fishermen. Last year was fishermen from Maine who were scallop fishing, and they had gear snapped and crushed them, but on their way to sailing down to Gloucester. The Tremont out of the Mid-Atlantic had 13 aboard a year or two ago, and a dog. I believe they all got off safely, but they were living on the boat. And so they got off safely, but we had to help all of them get access to housing and food. With losses like the Lily Jean, every one of the 7 who was lost was a potential bread earner for multiple family members. So now after the loss, we are having to make sure that the mom and the aunt and the sister have access to their rent and their food and health insurance and the like for the coming days. We bring trauma support treatment to basically anywhere they are for the first few weeks. The press conferences, when they hear that the search has been called off, when they hear that the search for their bodies has been called off. These are very difficult moments for these families, and it's a critically important time to intervene. I'll just end by saying that we try to have a holistic model where we provide what a human resources agency would provide for a workforce. We try to do everything from prevention all the way up to working with folks after the worst disasters. The fishing industry really has it more difficult than almost any other workforce in the country. So I greatly appreciate your support and the opportunity to be here to talk about it.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to hear from some of the fishing groups because I've come to appreciate sort of your presence of the MLA weekend or safety training with the course, but I think it would be best to hear from some of the folks in experience.
Yeah, I would just like to echo the tremendous work that your organization does for the fishing industry. I've heard countless times from fishermen that I work with the value of the safety training. I think also the mental health aspect is extremely important, and worker safety. As someone who was a prior fisheries observer, I have done numerous safety trainings, but I've also been involved in your training and is by far superior. Nothing against the observer program, but I've encouraged them to almost contract you to do that level of safety. I think as a newbie out of college at 22, doing a safety training, you don't fully understand or comprehend the risks of going out to sea, and being part of the fishing partnership safety training where you're doing it alongside commercial fishermen who have the real experience, who have seen these risks, who can share that perspective, to me was very informative and also troubling and scary to understand or come to terms with some of the serious risks. I also just want to commend for the mental health support services you do for families during these type of tragedies. I know that there are fishermen that I've talked to who experience PTSD, or they've been the one who had to recover a body in the water and they have never been able to get over that. When the Lily Jean happened, for days, I'd wake up in sweats and tears thinking I was suffocating and drowning. But so even fishermen or observers, it's really important. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you.
And I'd like to echo Aubrey's sentiment. The annual weekend, your presence there, your staff, they're nothing but ingratiating, and what you bring to the fishing industry, from the dental cleanings, the safety training. And, you know, having gone through the safety training myself, as green as the grass was, I said to myself, I'm just going to go fishing in July and August, and I'm not going to lose sight of land. Because let me tell you, when I got to that water table station, I was horrified. But I don't know that. I'm just a girl that doesn't fish. And when I saw that, and the fishermen that were there and how they were interactive with the stations, I have a, you know, heartfelt appreciation for that. And I know the industry does too. And I'll probably go through the safety training again, because that was probably 11, 12 years ago. And I've never put on a survival suit, but I did it. And that's terrifying too. And I think the guy that got in the raft in front of me, I was right behind him, and I think I pushed him in. So I just think that anyone who puts themselves on a boat should be safety trained. And I just want to say thank you.
Oh, okay.
Can you hear me?
I just want to emphasize again the roles the navigators played in the Lily Jean tragedy. Being there as one of the first people on scene, it was incredible to see the work that they did. The way they comforted the families, led them to the right resources for the first couple of weeks. But it hasn't ended for the navigators. They're still there every day. Then I was just with the navigators on a safety trip, and they were in contact with 3 different families during those 8 days, helping them with different issues when it comes to their particular situation in dealing with losing a loved one. So the navigators in the 4 stations that we have in Massachusetts are a resource that we're very lucky to have.
Okay, Vito, can you, I think it's all yours.
Very good. I'm glad Al chimed in on that. You know, my first real close experience with the partnership and JJ, and I've known him for years, but as Al was, I was heavily involved in through this whole initial loss of the Lily Jean, and I got to see them in full action, them being the partnership. I mean, they had grief counseling there on the spot. They made sure people had places to stay. They've been not only compassionate, but they make sure they have the resources behind them to do a professional job. So I was proud to be a part of that. And JJ, thank you for what your organization does. And I could not agree more with the sensitivity that they showed and the need. You know, it's we're raising funds, but without the social service and the expertise of the partnership, I mean, it was a team effort. So those are things that are done behind the scenes that I ordinarily would never have seen. The safety training, of course, is a no-brainer, and they do an excellent job of that. So I just wanted to make sure I chimed in on that. And again, thank you to the partnership.
Vito, thanks a lot. Safatia, you right next.
Well, good morning, everyone. I have been involved with them for over, I'd say, since they began. I'm not going to say how many years, but I also want to say there's a new safety training coming up. You haven't mentioned that. It's coming soon. Yeah. Yeah, it's coming up, and one in Gloucester is May. But I go to them every year. We also want to thank you because you have CPR classes that also is open to the DMF team. I'm very spoiled because I worked closely with everyone in this organization for years with the Fishermen's Wives. And I must say the transition from the Italian gold 30 years ago, when I was just a young Fisherman's Wives going through that, was brutal. We had nothing. We had to do a delegation to try to even get robotics to go down and help and try to do anything. And there was nothing. We were left with the pieces. When we did the Fisherman's Wives statue, we got another crush about a boat being hit by a Russian trawler, and just the captain again survived, and we lost all our friends, but yet we still had to do the announcement of the unveiling of the statue, which is coming up now on 25 years. Nothing has changed in 30 years as far as the pain and sorrow and the fear every day of a fisherman going out to sea. Mental health. I lost my husband to suicide, so because of the fishing industry. So it never changes in the families that it leaves behind, but having an organization. And you know what, I used to be on the opposite side where I always would scream at DMF. And on this side, we have a team that's unbelievable. My commissioner, Dan, have not left the sides, went and didn't have to go, went to Jada's. We have someone going every single place to make sure that these families know that all the organizations are together, that we've had all of the families' celebration of life. The last one that's coming up is John Beale Sr. and Jr. on April 26th in Gloucester. The Fisherman's Memorial that's coming up, to Dan make sure that Jada's name gets on the tablets at the statue, which she'll be the first female on that. Working together with the organization. You can't do it alone. And to know that you can just scream at JJ, because I've called him so many times screaming, JJ, who's getting down there? Who's going out this and that? Your team's already here. This time, are we going there at the last minute? Because you know what? You don't know when a crisis is going to hit, but to know that you can make a call and make that call to say, yes, we're there, and to embrace all the organizations and have that network. Look around the room, everyone, because we've all worked together. We've all had a crisis in our communities, whether it was on shore or not. And we butt heads, but the best thing about it is, if we learned anything from this loss, is that we can stand together and we can work together for the benefit of all. We can't dictate what's going to happen with the wind turbines, the LNGs, drilling. We can't dictate what's going to happen, how much funding's going, whatever. But we can with our lives and what we've been doing together with all of them, not just Massachusetts, with Maine and all of it together. We all should look at each other and say thank you. And I want to thank my team, because no matter how much promotion, everything we can do, buy the fish, do the fish, people don't realize the risk everyone takes to feed you. 100% protein. They don't realize the risk that everyone goes there, whether it's an old boat because they can't fix it, whether they didn't have the right or the life jackets, or they didn't pop up. But what happens is we learn from them, and with the MFP and with what we have on team, is to say what we can do is make sure that, why don't they have the funding? How do we get the fundings to make sure that they have the safety equipment, that they do these programs, the life jackets, a simple EBAR. What do they do? What's preventing them, especially if they go in state waters? It doesn't matter. We've had boats that went under right there and lost fishermen right there. And we lost fishermen right at the wharfs. So I just want to thank everyone here, but I'm kind of biased because I've worked with JJ from the beginning, and so I can scream and holler and say how I feel. But I wanted to thank my whole team also, because being on the other side, yes, I bitch all the time at DMF and nowhere and everything else, because I was on one side and Ed Barrett's looking at me because I would scream with him. But to be on this side and look out in a different window to see, wow, what are the consequences we're going, and to lose someone so young as Jada, but to lose everyone who just wanted to fish to continue his National Guard or wanted to do his boat. I'm working behind the scenes with the family. I'm an expert at Social Security, Medicare, and everyone knows that. All the rest of the stuff, saw the video, saw all these things, but it's not going to work if we don't work together and we don't get the mental health services out there, because people don't realize what mental health. They say, well, I'm fine, I'm not depressed. It doesn't have to be depression, people, anything. So thank you.
So I think we want.
Yeah. I just want to reinforce everything, Safati said, but just say, from the point of view of the Haley Driscoll administration as commissioner, in whatever way we can support the industry in safety and training, I think we're all in. You know, there's not a lot we can do. We're not the Coast Guard. We're not the navigators. We're managing fisheries, but we have relationships with all the people who are out fishing in one way or another. And if we can support them, we want to try. I just want to make that very clear, you know. And I think for some of our team, you know, the loss of Jada as well as an observer also hit home that it isn't just people that are fishing, it's people who are involved, you know, even more broadly. But I want to just reiterate that we want to help. That's why I think it's great that Dan asked JJ and others. And we know that there's a larger community beyond MFP that's engaged in this. And I think we're just opening up. What do we need? We need to hear from all of you what we need to do. What does the administration need to do to help support, prevent these things from happening again as best as we can? So I just wanted to make it very clear that that's where we're coming from. And if you wonder why is Commissioner from the Department of Fish and Game showing up, because I do care. I know our whole team cares. So that's why we're here, and we're going to continue to show that support. So I just want to make sure we've made that, you know, we want to help. So appreciate your presentation, JJ. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry.
I'm coming. I'd probably like to take a little bit higher altitude view of safety, and this is something my wife came up with, which was at every level of this business, there's stress. Whether it's maintaining a vessel, dealing with weather, dealing with regulations, dealing with infrastructure problems, tie up, every level. There's not 1 second of your business day that you're not dealing with a challenge. And, you know, a lot of these things, you know, when we're here with our partners at DMF, you know, a lot of that stress comes from regulatory stress. And so I think when we start thinking about safety, we gotta first and foremost think about regulation and how it drives. This is what's driving these business decisions that end up in disasters. So when the administration wants to reach out and make this industry safer, we have to have some real conversations about the regulatory end and what's not making it safe in that realm.
All right, I'm going to take a little different tactic when we wrap this up, but I could go back 75 years when my grandfather was a fisherman. He was lost at sea. There was no support service. There was the Red Cross that came, and they wanted to be reimbursed once they left. It's totally different now. It's needed. It's something that I very much appreciate for the support services, but then it comes to the health services and the safety training. 35 years ago, my brother was lost at sea, had a heart attack. There was no one on board that knew CPR. Now it's commonplace. Everyone's required to have at least one that has on board that knows CPR. These services are provided. When I became a drill conductor, I got certified as a drill conductor. The training was probably less intensive than the safety training that's provided by the Fisheries Partnership right now. So I felt confident when I was at sea that I knew how to be safe, but my crew did not. And during the safety training and when I had the crew put on survival suits, they were fumbling around. It's a Gumby suit. It's called that for a reason. You don't have any fingers. It's the zippers, if they're not lubricated, you can't get them on. You need to help each other. Everybody's trying to do it themselves. All these things are very, very important for fishing industry, and I totally support, all the safety training. It's fishing is a vocation where everyone has to be a partner. You're not going to say, well, that's not in my job description. I don't have to do that. Everyone has to help each other. The safety training actually points that out. When you have to help somebody get into a survival suit or help them get into a life raft. Because getting into a life raft when you're in the water in a Gumby suit isn't very easy. You can't just kick and get in. And if any kind of sea condition, you need cooperation from everyone else. So I totally support the fishing partnership. I think it's a great program, and anything we can do on this level to support it would be helpful.
Really quick, yeah. For many years, I would go down to DC and advocate for legislation was called Fish Wellness Act. And it was supposed to provide funds for fishery safety programs, which I still strongly believe that there needs to be on a national level funds for these type of programs. But I guess I'm just, as I'm teeing up for Dan, I'm wondering if there's things that we could do maybe at a state level in terms of legislation. Because like I said, the fish wellness would do wonders for this type of program and elevating and giving long-term funding. But if there's things we can do at the state level, that would be another suggestion.
I think to wrap up, I think that's kind of what we're asking for and hoping for, that there would be conversations with you all and JJ, especially with the commissioner and the about some targeted asks that we think that the legislature and even the governor, I think, are ripe right now for a sort of positive response. So let's take advantage of that. And I see Beth has got her hand up. Go ahead, Beth.
Get the computer. So do we want to maybe submit a letter? Increase that line item? I mean, I think so.
That the line item is for what?
I don't know. Isn't there a budgetary line item to support?
Not specifically for safety. Yeah.
Well, is it to the Fishing Partnership Support Services?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so.
Yeah, so I think a conversation with the department and the support services leadership is appropriate. And I think we're all coming together on that. And then, so Ed, I just want to assure you that with my team, as we talk about new regulations, we're really sensitive to economics, like people's bottom line, and also safety issues. For example, we've sort of developed that 2-day program where people could go out and fish, 2 days overnight and bring in 2 days catch, so they didn't have to steam all the way and waste all that fuel, and especially now with high diesel prices. So we're sensitive to that, and if you have suggestions to us to how we can do better, we're certainly open-minded about that.
Can I just push a little bit? So the legislative session, we're in session, there are bills flying about. So I'm just curious, like, I think, can people move this year to try to get some money?
Yeah, I mean, things like earmarks could be developed right now during this budget process.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think people should move quickly to come up with some concrete proposals.
You don't, well, they have a line item right now. You don't want to say we want it for safety because it'll take away from the organization. You want to embark for safety.
Yeah.
Like our team, we all saying right here, safety, safety. You can add and talk to the legislature saying, well, they already have a line item. That's already for the Fisheries Partnership to succeed and do what they want. If you put safety in it, they'll take a chunk off for safety. They're not gonna be able to do the other programs. So you want to say,
You
we'd
would
like
say
to,
that.
if we want this, embark for safety.
Yeah. So,
And you can do that.
so JJ, inviting you to reach out to the commissioner and let's, in the next,
Right here.
or even the next week, right?
I mean, yeah,
What-
timing is critical.
Yeah.
You have a window and you should.
Yeah, you have to do it.
Yeah.
And
So-
I think the best point, if you guys can figure out what the ask is, we could easily circulate, a letter around for everybody to sign, or we'll just put your name on or whatever it is. So.
Yeah.
And maybe you two could connect on the break that we're about to take to find a
All
time.
right, very good.
Let's take a 10-minute break. So it's 10:57. So we'll come back at 7 after, and we'll try to figure out the audio in the room. Thanks to folks online. Hello, folks online. We're gonna go ahead and get started.
Did we undo? Okay.
Yes, we are unmuted there.
Story, you're the, who's,
Yeah, but can you come up here maybe? I think that would be good.
you can talk into my computer, lucky you.
Okay, so we have two more agenda items for today, or two substantial ones.
Good.
Um,
Slides. Good.
We're gonna start with the Economic Development Focus Group. And basically, so that focus group met now at the end of the year.
Yep.
I think. And put together an outline for a narrative presentation on the importance of the I'm gonna walk really close to the house. On the importance of the seafood industry to the economics of the state. And Story has now taken that outline developed by the focus group and started to put some meat on the bones.
Yep.
There, which she's gonna present today. We had hoped to go through this and some of the ideas that actually Aubrey had shared on economic opportunities. We're running a bit behind, so we're gonna see how much we can get to today. We might end up turning the focus group after this meeting and get more into the weeds. The end goal, or not end goal, but the next goal is to invite the Office of Economic Development to our hopefully June-ish meeting and try to present the polished version of the narrative that Story's about to test.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks, Abby. And thanks to everybody that's on this focus group. I was able to go back to my notes and, pretty logically put this together. So, we want to hear feedback on this both today and after the fact. We can provide the slides, but, try to summarize the industry. So if we think about the Massachusetts seafood industry, we think about our unique geographic location where we have access to all these different fisheries, right? We have north of the Cape, south of the Cape, Georges Bank. It's nice to mention that. And then second, Massachusetts as a state is a huge seafood processing hub. So not only are we landing $600 million a year's worth of seafood or whatever here, but we have this huge seafood processing capacity and shipping. And then there's kind of the historic nature of this industry and the tourism component that I think we want to mention as well. So you've got that. So the good news since we met with that focus group is NOAA Fisheries released their latest Fisheries of the US, and that's for 2023. So that's why you're seeing that year's data presented here, but it's the most recent that NOAA's done and it just came out. So if we look into that report and present that type of information, we can see that Massachusetts seafood industry jobs are at 172,000, which is number one in the country. And that includes everything from the boats to the processors to retail. And then for sales impacts in Massachusetts, $17 billion. And that's first sale through final sale to the consumer, third in the country. Income impacts, wages, salaries, earnings of all related sectors. And NOAA defines this right down to some of the tourism related aspects, which, I couldn't dig into too much, but it goes kind of, the income impacts go way out. $4 billion, again, third in the country. And then value added impacts, which is defined as the new economic value created at each state of the supply chain, $6.5 billion, third in the country.
Who are the two states ahead of us?
Oh, that's a good question. Alaska and it might have been California. Anyway, it's there.
Okay.
But that's, so, I think depending on how we present this, if this is going to be a presentation, we have this. If we put it in a little bit different format, maybe we could put the table. Maybe that's a suggestion. We put the table if that's going to be a common question. So this was good summary information on the seafood industry as a whole in Massachusetts. And I think, the message is it's a big economic driver in Massachusetts, period. Okay, next. And then if we get into more at our vessels and what's being landed in Massachusetts, this first slide is pulled from the 2023 Fisheries of the US. So it's pretty high level. The ex-vessel value of all species landed in Massachusetts in 2023 was $574 million, which was third in total value behind Alaska and Maine.
Thank you.
New Bedford is the highest valued port in the US at $363 million in 2023, driven by sea scallops, as we know. And the top three valued species in Massachusetts, sea scallops, lobster, and oysters, which are primarily coming from aquaculture operations. Just some other landings highlights. Massachusetts landed 156 million pounds of seafood. I guess that kind of puts a scale on it if we're talking to people that aren't as familiar with the industry. And New Bedford, although being ranked #1 in value, 16th ranked port in the country in landings by pounds. So it's the high value of the sea scallops obviously driving that, but it's kind of an interesting fact. So then we talked about putting, well, this is another way to look at ex-vessel value over time across all of our species. So we had that $576 million figure for 2023. This puts some of the other years around it in context. 2021, you'll remember, was a year, the year that seafood and many things bounced back after COVID. There was some inflation. These are not adjusted for inflation, these numbers, but puts it in context. But we're, right around that $600 million ex-vessel value figure annually. And then we wanted to spotlight some of our fisheries in Massachusetts. So the one I focused on for this is the lobster fishery for a couple of reasons. It's the biggest valued species coming out of state waters. And in total, 16.5 million pounds or so were landed in 2024 with an ex-vessel value of $115 million. We have roughly 600 active lobster fishers, and the landing ports are spread out throughout the state. So I thought this was a key piece that we might want to talk to economic development types about, is that this isn't just, we're not just talking about New Bedford, Gloucester, and Boston all the time. It's all the ports in between, right? And I think that this fishery kind of shows us that. The #3 port in the state is now Rockport. Plymouth is big, Beverly is big, Duxbury, Marshfield, and if we continue down the list, there's more, right? So we just want to make the economic development people aware of the regionality of this, that it is spread out throughout the state. So some fun facts: 6 ports make up 2/3 of the landings, but then there's several more below that. And Gloucester is at 4.3 million pounds in 2025.
I'm just wondering, like, is that landings by where the boat is registered or where it actually lands?
Where it actually lands. So the port of landing from either dealer or fisherman data, whichever we're using. Good question. Yeah.
Yeah.
So sorry, those could be boats from Maine. Yeah. That are going into Gloucester, right?
Theoretically, yeah. So say a dragger that's out of state but lands few lobsters. Yeah. Yep. That's right.
So those are offshore. Those are like federal permits mostly.
Yes, Area 3, the offshore boats that are landing in New Bedford. Yep. Yeah.
And the commissioner's point, like, we were just recently tracking the number of Virginia, Maryland, New Jersey boats that are regulars in Massachusetts. So it's and in our port. So it's definitely.
So all those landings are being included in these figures we're seeing, and that's a good point. Yep.
Sorry, #2 to Alaska, not #3 now to Maine.
I think
Mississippi's #2.
I think that
because the Gulf
scallop landings have been going down a bit over the
we're
past couple of
in
years.
Well, I'll let Eric talk about it. The cycle is off right now compared to where it was in 2018, 19, 20.
Yeah. So that's what's taken us down a slight notch there. Yeah. And this is just a look at the running total of ex-vessel value of lobster over the past half dozen years. And you can, again, see that 2021 spike. And that was a price spike. I think the average price per pound of lobster that year was over $7 a pound. So again, not adjusted for inflation. Okay, so that was lobster. We can think about if there's other fisheries that we would want to highlight in a presentation like this. I put groundfish up here, looking at the running total of ex-vessel value of groundfish. we'll take suggestions here. We could talk about this in a follow-up focus group, but how else do we want to look at it? Do we want to look at a couple other fisheries that we want to highlight? Do we want to look at the regional aspect a little bit more, like look at total landings by port, not just a certain species, so just think about that. We can do some of that without a ton of work, but I think it's the message that the group wants to get across to economic development officials and what makes the most sense there.
Ed. Okay, well, you guys can share nicely.
What I worry about these days, when I read something like the Boston Globe business page, and I see that, biotech is $500 billion economic impact in the city, or the hospital industry, or all the and then I look at what we're producing. I'm saying it seems that we're shrinking as a economic driver
in relation to
in relation to others, and I think you have to, so there's an economic competition that exists. We can call it offshore wind. So it has impacts on port infrastructure. I know I say this all the time, but the cruise industry in Plymouth, offshore wind in New Bedford, and these are all resources that you're now competing with. And if someone in economic development's looking at it, they're like, hey, you're only like, no offense, but you're less than $1 billion, which used to be a big number, but not so much anymore. So I think so there's I think when we think of economic development, we have to keep in mind that it's not just that we're competing against other industries.
Ed, can I point out one number that I think is very compelling? 172,000 jobs. Yeah. And so one thing economic development worries a lot about, as my understanding, is jobs going up or jobs going down, no matter how small the number is, especially in relation to where they're at. And that does matter.
It does matter, but unfortunately, all I see is jobs going down. And again, there's a lot of we don't need to discuss that right now, but I know a lot of people that are like 30 years into this fishery that are like, why am I doing this? I can't even compete. I'm not even competing with the plumber. That I have a $300,000 boat that I have to maintain, and this guy's got a set of wrenches, and he's charging $150 an hour to come to my house. So, I don't have any solutions here, but I'm just saying that every day when I read a business page and I go, wow, that's a big number. And I think about what our number is and what our numbers are doing, I get concerned.
So maybe I think that's going to be a takeaway for this presentation, right? Is like, how are you making are you not just looking at within the fishing industry, but how are you trying to emphasize the importance in comparison to other industries? Let's go to Gordon and then Aubrey.
Yeah, as a recovering state economic development official, I would say that it is a statewide economic development strategy, right? So sure, and again, they've pumped $10 billion into the life sciences industry, so we're not surprised. What the effort here is to break through into the economic development strategy for commercial fishing, right? If it had been a priority for 25 years and all of what you just said was still true, then yeah, white flag the thing, right? Like I give. Our point here is to try to get into that conversation and to get the attention from state officials for the industry. We're never going to be on par with life sciences by any stretch, but it's a very important economic development strategy for things outside of Cambridge and South Boston. So I think that's sort of the point of the strategy. One of the things that I'm working on, it's not ready for now, but for the next focus group is I'm getting the NAICS code, the list, the federal list of establishments from right now 4 different categories statewide in Massachusetts: processing, packaging, finfish, shellfish, and a couple of others, which will allow us, and if it doesn't help us, then we won't share it, but it will allow us to map those establishments statewide by zip code, right? Or another way to look at it is by legislative district, right? So that, the port landings is one thing, but certainly on the processing side, we process way more than we land in Massachusetts. But you can process Norwegian salmon anywhere, right? You could do that in Pittsburgh because it all comes on passenger planes, but it's done here because of the commercial fishing industry, right? You can't disaggregate those things once they're here. So commercial fishing absolutely ought to take credit and ownership of the processing side, whether it's landed here or not. So that's the sort of the multiplier effect that's in a lot of those numbers, I think, as well. I want to be able to show geographically what that footprint is in Massachusetts to make that more compelling than it is. I mean, that the pie chart is great to show the diversity of the ports. I think, and I hope I'm right, that goes much more broadly inland and around the state than just the coastline. So that's the other piece that hopefully the next time we gather, we can look at.
Yeah, I think that's really good. Gordon, Aubrey.
To your first initial question about species, I think, having lobster and maybe a few others highlighted is helpful. I always think kind of visual. Sorry, were you pointing?
No, he's saying he wants to come back.
Oh, okay. I was like, sorry. So I think having a few different species would be helpful. I know when I have done some economic development reports in Rhode Island, the multiplier was 3.06. So I think there's value in talking about that multiplier in terms of economic jobs and support. But I also feel in Massachusetts, we're really unique in the type of like ice houses, fuel, like other gear manufacturers that I think maybe this director wouldn't be aware of. I mean, I know Point Judith is an excellent place that has a lot all at once, but I think there are places in the state that we can highlight that create jobs and create opportunity that, keep other boats from New Jersey, Virginia coming to New Bedford or coming to Gloucester. And so I think being able to highlight that is another way of showing kind of the strength of the blue economy here in our state.
Nice, Aubrey. Thanks.
Just very quickly, because I don't know if Roger's still on, but the other piece that we should think about for this is where are the growth opportunities in the industry, particularly the commercial fishing? What are we not fishing that we could be that could sort of expand that pie even further? So it's not, it is certainly sustaining what we have, but are there things that we could be doing, or from a regulatory perspective, we could facilitate that could actually grow the industry as well? It's just
Great.
another.
So we're going to go to Eric, and then I think Roger came off mute, and then Vito has a hand up, and then and then Beth, and then we're going to keep moving.
I just want to add one thing. You're talking about value. There's one part of the industry that's not valued at all, and that's the healthy protein that it produces. It's no antibiotics added. It's a wild protein. The health benefits are immeasurable as far as the food source. That's something that has to be factored in somehow. I'm not exactly sure how, but you can't put a dollars and cents on that.
Yeah, that's good.
Nice. Thanks, Eric. Okay, Roger, if you're with us.
Yep.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no. I'm listening, trying to assimilate everything that I'm hearing in terms of putting it into an economic strategy here. I think we're on the right track. So continue.
Thanks, Roger. Beth, and then Vito. Okay.
No, I'm all set. Yeah, thank you.
I echo everyone's sentiment here. And, in Massachusetts, I've talked to Dan and Allison's story. Lobster processing is at a minimal. And we've been baking an idea to have this circle economics and process lobster and crab and extract everything we can out of it. And I'll send along our draft idea. It's still in draft mode, but it's a Herculean lift, and there's so many value added products that we want to incorporate into this one-stop shop, will you? And looking ahead, the lobster processing that happens in Canada, we estimate it to be about 75 cents a pound. You know, it used to be 50 or 25. Now it's probably going to be $1.25 a pound to ship lobsters from Massachusetts to Canada, to have it come back and sold to our customers here as a product of Canada or in the US. I like the number about the number of jobs. I've never seen that number. And I think about this, you know, creating jobs takes education. I went to the Green Crab Summit at the Aggie School. We don't have any fishing schools. Where do you go to school to learn how to fish? Where are kids exposed to fishing? Kids in the western part of the state, they might like coming to the beach, but they have no idea how to get involved. So maybe there's some type of educational bridge between the ag or even VOTEC schools. And I live on the South Shore. The VOTEC schools would be a good conduit too, because we need to bring the next generation into it. I like that number.
Nice. We have Vito online, and then we'll come to the commissioner. Vito, go ahead.
Sure. I just want to say about the port infrastructures, the hub ports and the critical components, all of the major ports that, especially for ground fishery, has constricted dramatically. We're down to, you know, one ice company that really at this point has not been able to recapitalize and be prepared to actually take care of a full fleet. So the fleet has shrunk dramatically over the last 10 years alone. And the lost economic opportunity, when I look at those revenue streams, it's disheartening to know that when the Magnuson changed, so the Magnuson 2006 had to be fully implemented in all fisheries by 2010, which was why we got, you know, into this quote unquote catch share program, because a multi-species fishery cannot operate under the old system with the new law. Impossible. One stock would have triggered an entire shutdown of either the Georges Bank or Gulf of Maine or both. So it wasn't a choice. It was something we had to go to the hard tack, and we knew we were going to lose people in that, but the law did that. Along with that is the science that, you know, when we talk about what can be done from a regulation standpoint, full deference now is given to the science and all of the abundance information that feeds our multi-species stock assessments. It's essentially the bottom trawl survey. You know, if you ask pop dive folks, they will tell you all of the amazing data that comes out of the fishery. We're at 100% monitoring. We have the sector system is incredible in how it reports everything within a week. The government has everything. And for the first time in my lifetime, we're watching the groundfish fishery be destroyed basically during a period of abundance. Fish stocks where they're supposed to be are still there. They're not moving deep. They're not moving east. Those are anecdotal things. It's not happening. Cod are where cod is supposed to be. In fact, a lot of them are west of where they used to be and are staying there. So we've lost out on, I'm not even going to say tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars simply by toggle switches that are being done inside stock assessment models. If there's any, you know, everyone asks what can be done different for management. We have to work with the science, and that's our plan, is to work with them, not against them, but they need to start looking at this data, because the catch rates and those revenues that you see in that chart are occurring on a fleet that is 10% of what it was just 15 years ago. So much more revenue is coming from much fewer boats, and they're not bigger, better boats. They're the same boats that we had 40 years ago. So The economic loss of opportunity has been massive, and it's attributable to having science that only relies on the weakest data point that they have to work with, which is the abundance indices from the trawl survey. So I can't say it enough because we're down to 2 viable unloading facilities in Gloucester now from 10. We're down to a half an ice plant. There's one gear shop, and the guy's doing it out of charity. He's 70 odd years old and still doing it. So a major hub port is missing. We're getting close to being out of business. It's a 911 on the shore infrastructure for sure, and the science is where it needs to happen to fix it. But
Thanks, Vito. Thank you. Okay, let's give the commissioner last word here.
Yeah. I heard hearing from Vito talking about the supply side and the infrastructure to help with the supply. But one thing I just want to share that I hear a lot is the demand side, and that we need more, say, institutional buyers, whether it's schools or prisons or food banks and others that are providing a reliable demand for Massachusetts or, fish to come into Massachusetts and being consumed by people from Massachusetts as a healthy protein, as Eric's saying. But then if there's a supply issue and we're increasing demand, that I'd leave it to you all to kind of think about. But I'm hearing we need to do more with demand.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner. And that's definitely come up before. And the next slide, which we're not really going to have time for today, is just some ideas that Aubrey had actually initially put together that we want to bring back to the focus group and have a little bit more discussion on like what could there be done, like what suggestions does this group want to make. So we'll just leave those up for people to take a look. We'll give Pat the final word here, and then unfortunately we're gonna have to keep moving.
No, it's a problem. So I think in the presentation, which is great, and all the suggestions sound good, I think what's missing is the human part. So I think there's 2 parts. There's USDA had a really good program called Know Your Farmer that they spent a lot of money on under, I think, Obama, and it was very compelling advertising for having a family standing with a pitchfork and like hay and or cow or whatever and telling their story. So I do think there's stories that need to be intermixed with the data that actually have people talking, like videos, whatever you can do. I think the other piece I might add to that too is I think that the EOED is heavily staffed with private sector entrepreneurs at this point. So every person you can feature who's an entrepreneur, who's actually doing something really interesting in the seafood industry, like maybe Beth described or whatever it is, those stories will be compelling to those folks. So I think about that as well. Okay.
Do you want to transition us to?
Yes. Okay. Do you want to see if you can find Dan?
I'm bringing this up at our next meeting and discuss it in more detail.
Yeah.
So, I'm just seeing it for the first time, and there's a lot of good stuff on there. So let's do that.
And so we'll bring it to the focus group first, which we want to convene, I think, in April, and we can have some more discussion. And then we would bring it definitely to June.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Do you want to pull the other one back to the California? Sense there's 2. Yeah.
Thank you all. I'm going to join you online for the rest of the conversation.
Travel safe.
Thank you.
Eye on the road.
You guys driving separately?
Eyes on the road. We should have coordinated
Yeah.
better, but we're coming from very different
Another
directions. Another time.
Well, these slides will be available, right, for everybody?
Yep.
Okay. Not these slides, the previous slides too.
Yep.
Right. Okay. So we wanted to share with you what the California Coastal Commission did in terms of developing an offshore wind and fishing strategy, which was required or mandated in California legislation by the California legislature. And full disclosure, CDI works with another firm in California to facilitate a fair amount of this. So, anything that looks bad is totally our fault. And so the Coastal Commission is now actually going through the final review of this strategy, and the Coastal Commission, I think, votes on it later in April. But I think what's interesting is it was trying to develop a strategy before things got ahead of them, right? So it's floating. There are 5 leases, but they're kind of long-term development because it's floating. It's not happening tomorrow. And we all know what kind of the state of the industry is generally right now. So it's an interesting example of a state trying to think about a comprehensive approach to fisheries and offshore wind together. So these slides are the Coastal Commission's, and I'm going to try to keep it briefer. I've got more detail to share with you if you want. We can go as detailed as you want, but this gives a decent overview. So next slide. Okay. So Again, the Coastal Commission is kind of a unique, we don't really have, we have it's this equivalent of CZM kind of, but the Coastal Commission has a lot more resources and power for whatever reasons in California than necessarily CZM does. And essentially the legislature in California said, we want to really think about how we can do this better and well together, because even though the fishing industry in California is quite different, both culturally and what they fish for and how they fish, it's still, present and important. Okay. And to Ed's point, it is also compared to California's economy, like barely a blip, right, in terms of its scale. So here were the key goals of what the process was trying to do. Coexistence, our favorite word, which is lovely to say, but no one knows what it actually means. Avoiding and minimizing impacts, much like kind of environmental impact statement kind of approaches. Address compensation, and then also addressed like resilience, which I'll get to in a second. Okay. So they had a working group which had fishermen from across the ports it service were actually fishing in those areas where the five leases were. Fishery associations, there were also tribes involved too. There's 124 tribes in California. It's very complicated to manage tribes and engagement with tribes in California in that regard, but there were 3 members there who were there. And then there were 5 wind lessees, many of which were people you would look exactly like the people you've dealt with, for instance. And then we were facilitators, and then there were a number of government agencies from California, and Bowman were involved. And then when the Trump administration came, they were not involved, but the state was a state strategy, so it kept going. Okay, it took a lot of work. No surprise to all of you. We can go on from that one. Okay, so this is guidance. It's not regulatory, but it essentially gives developers a roadmap for when they apply for their coastal zone consistency permit with the commission. If they don't follow the guidance, they are going to be in trouble, frankly. So even though it's not regulatory, it does have important weight because the Coastal Commission is going to look at the guidance and then the application when it comes in and say, hey, you did your job, or no, you didn't. Okay, so this is the content. It talked about communication practices. It talked about surveys and data collection best practices. It did, I'll show you some examples if we have time, very specific avoidance and minimization measures for various things that were impacts that fishermen believe offshore wind would create, particularly floating. It has a methodology for socioeconomic impact analysis, which is not Woods Hole's, just saying. I can describe that was more painful than I thought it would be, but anyway, it has a compensatory mitigation framework, and then has a whole set chapter on tribal fisheries in particular. Okay. So one of the things that the commission wanted was they hired Northern Economics to try to look at what would be best practice in analyzing essentially money in. How do we calculate the overall impact of offshore wind on fisheries and then have a number we can work with to negotiate through this, CZM can't require, but can allow for essentially that fund, right? That compensation fund. And so this method it estimates the potential impacts of the income. It really focuses particularly on dependence of a particular port on a particular wind energy area or a particular fishery to get a sense of the overall, not the effect overall, but the effect very specifically. So we have a better sense of allocative effects. And then it also has more about, and this is a big fight between the developers and the fishermen in negotiating this, is how much it should bring in kind of the more qualitative aspects of, second and third order effects, and questions around like it's very hard to measure how crowding. So if you can't fish an offshore wind area anymore, you crowd other fishermen who weren't there either, but now you're with them. But that's actually really hard to measure. So there were a lot of things we had discussions about. It wasn't perfect. The developers didn't love it, but I think it is based somewhat on the models people have used to date, but it's got more stuff in it. And so if Massachusetts wanted to look at that for the future, I think it's worth looking at because it tries to bring in some other factors when people calculate that number. Okay, so, and then it also made very clear, because I think what we've learned is direct compensation. Yes, you can argue, you can guess at a model big number, but then how do you actually determine how people get it, right? And it turns out direct compensation for any of you who are experiencing these programs currently, they're hard to utilize. They're not giving out enough money. It's hard, they're expected to show some vague cause and effect, which is hard to do. And so really, I think the developers in many cases have coming around to a lot of them actually go into resiliency fund that the fishing community controls. And it can be distributed in a lot of ways rather than trying to trace every impact to every individual fisherman and then have this direct program, because those are really hard. For people who have major impacts, yes, you can do it. But for a lot of fishermen, it's hard to do and they're not getting enough money.
Funds different than CDAs or
they're different. So resiliency fund, well, they're sort of similar. So California did have, There was some community benefits agreements negotiated kind of either with ports or the like. They had fishing in it and some other stuff. These are very specifically for fishermen. And in the next letter, I'll describe how they're used. That's a great question. So that we already talked about the direct compensation. You guys are experienced with some of these programs that exist now from Vineyard and Orsted. They are what they are. They're imperfect, they're difficult, they're hard. Next one. And then they developed a resiliency fund program. And this was, the fishermen felt very strongly about governance. So there was a lot of conversation in the strategy is essentially that there's essentially a resiliency administrative entity who may be by region or by the whole state, who generally is preferred to be a fishing organization or highly connected to fishing. And they actually manage essentially a process of distributing those resiliency funds. And the idea would be that they would accept grant application under certain conditions, and then there'd be some kind of procurement process in which they'd be able to give them out. So in this case, I think DMF, in some ways is handling some of that through the funds that you have. Here, they've created a governance system where there'd be actually a regional resiliency committee composed mostly of fishermen who would then be making the decisions about where money goes and avoiding self, all that stuff. So in the strategy, there's a lot more structure around resiliency funds because the fishermen felt it was important to be heavily fishery controlled or at least heavily influenced. So there's that piece. I would say it's imperfect in many ways. Like the communication chapter, you're going to be like, yeah. The impacts chapter is more detailed around surveys and avoiding problems and impacts and avoidance and minimization. That's actually pretty good. And then I think there's a decent methodology for figuring out climate mitigation as a whole that's worth looking at. And then there's some interesting things in the compensation chapter around how to administer it that's worth looking at, and the like. And so the advantage of having something like this, I think, is it gives everyone kind of a common page to work from. It brings more consistency across projects that come to CZM or the state to look at. And potentially, if it's a robust and rigorous strategy, it also drives developers to do better. So I think that's the hope anyway. So,
and Pat, this is out if people wanted to, like,
yes,
we send.
so it's we can send around the link. It's available in draft, which I think it'll be accepted. Actually, it's pretty likely to be. So we can send it around and
It's
you can be critical. How about it?
It's good in theory. But I think already we've seen how a business like Orsted or Avangrid or any of those come to the table to negotiate. They don't play like easy.
No, they do not. You're correct.
They foreign corporations that really, have little care about local economies and are there to increase their bottom line. They want to make money.
Correct.
And we've seen it in the I've said this from Cape Wind on, is that there are effects that ripple through offshore wind development that aren't just site specific.
Correct.
And they have invested a lot of capital in making sure that anything they were forced to mitigate was site specific. And so that's what you're fighting. So you can come and say, well, we got this really good idea and let's go work together. And then they show up with a team of lawyers that you could never afford in your life.
But the thing that this, no, but I totally hear it.
That's the real world.
It's a hard-boiled negotiation. The state has limited authority in some ways. But what this allows is it gives the state a backstop if the state has one, and clarity publicly and particularly for the fishing industry, what the rules of the game are. And if the state were ever to decide to do this at some point, which right now probably doesn't make sense given where offshore wind is, it gives more heft to CZM's ability to do things, to negotiate, because it has this thing behind it. Right now, when CZM went into the negotiations with individual, and this wasn't Allison, this was Elisa and others, when they went into this, they did the very best they could with what they had, but they didn't have any guidance. Really, they were trying to. This industry was new, and what something like this could provide, now that everyone's learned so much, is it could provide a much better backstop for CZM.
And I'm not
Baltic CZM.
No, I know, yeah.
Uh,
No, it's the
I'm
companies
just
are,
saying,
yeah.
it can be outgunned by a multinational energy company easily. And, you know, and when we developed Revolution and when we didn't have science that we didn't have clear science on the effects. And we're doing this all after the effect. So what's gonna be the effect like 6 years from now? I think I've asked this before, you know,
We'll have more data.
too late, sorry.
For those projects.
For a lot of people, it'll
For,
be too
for the
late,
existing projects, maybe, but
you know,
Gordon
but,
was gonna,
you know, I don't have the answer.
oh, does he hand up?
No, I'm just pointing out the
Oh.
time.
Okay, okay, so, Aubrey, then Gordon.
Wait.
Offshore wind, and there was different case studies, and there was someone from Salem talking about the experience that they had there, and it was all related to community benefit agreements and just the process and the need for industry groups and coalitions to potentially work together, and that when developers are trying to create community benefit agreements, they're not going to want to create multiple ones, they're going to want to create one. And there was discussion about various legal firms offering pro bono services for industry groups, but the importance of working either with the state or mayors or municipalities to help hold developers accountable. It was interesting in a lot of ways, but also highlighted, to Ed's point, the complexities of, you know, when there's lease areas in a certain location, you know, the question I brought up in that meeting was, okay, like, well, the Cape is going to be impacted from the lease area off the backside of the Cape, but so is the community wherever the cables are going to go to, plus all the other fishermen who fish out of other ports who fish in the Gulf of Maine. And so how do you then assign one area or community to go to the table and talk with these developers? So I guess the reason why I'm bringing that up is I think these strategies are helpful, but it feels challenging to wrap your head around the fact that there's going to be such an impact from a variety of different ports and communities to try to all work together to come up with some plan forward that we can all rally around to then be at the table with these developers, because to Ed's point, they do come in with lawyers, like how we can affect change in a positive way, I guess, is where I'm still having a hard time knowing at what place in the process can we affect change.
Thanks, all right. And then we have Katie online, and then we should go to public comment.
We all experienced exactly what Ed said over the last several years, trying to play catch up on what those effects are going to be, and would often frustratingly get even from members of the federal government saying, yeah, we really don't know. We're going to have to figure that out. At least what this is showing me is that there are lessons learned, as Pat said, right? And that at least California is getting on the front of it. And hopefully the federal government, if and when it comes around, right? The federal government's the landlord, right? They lease the areas. They can dictate lease terms going forward. The state is the customer. They buy the power. They have all kinds of teeth through that weren't used last time that actually can be, so that those lawyers are much more constrained coming in to negotiate with you because the contracts depend on it, right? And that, again, the frustration doesn't go away from the previous experience of the last several years. But what we said was at least learn what we can now, so going forward, we don't repeat the same mistakes. It sounds like California, and again, who knows what their sort of politics are going to turn into and all that kind of stuff when this comes around. But at least there is demonstration that lessons have been learned, that they are trying to, on the front end, identify these things before there are actual procurement agreements with the developers.
All right, thanks, Brian.
Did you have a?
Yeah, Katie.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can.
Okay.
Thanks.
So, as a heads up, Rhode Island did something like this, and it was called the OSAMP. I don't know if you all are familiar with that. But it's called, it's the Ocean Special Area Management Plan, again, trying to get out ahead of any type of offshore development. And we also formed what was called a FAB, a Fishery Advisory Board, which comprised of different members of the fishing industry from different fisheries, to make sure we had a number of voices at the table when it came time to talk to the offshore developers. Well, the problem that we ran into in trying to get out in front of it was just that our, Coastal Resources Management Council, the fishing industry didn't feel like they used the SAMP as it was meant to be used and ignored that plan in favor of offshore wind. And I was, I attended all those meetings and it was so frustrating. We thought we had OSAMP as the backstop. It got so bad that all the FAB members resigned. So we didn't have a FAB for a long time. I think we might have some people now, but it was like pulling teeth to get some people to come back to the table to try and talk about this, but it was just such a disaster. So, I mean, I don't want to like say, don't do this. I just want to let you know. I think it was Ed that said, like, how can you put teeth in this? Because the fishing industry thought they had teeth by having the OSAMP plan. And then it wasn't that way. So
No,
just a heads up.
no, totally good caution. And I think one of the odd things about this process was the Coastal Commission did not fully understand its authority vis-a-vis offshore wind and actually had to learn and figure out what it was, including internally with their attorney. So part of the strategy includes a pretty long section, which I will not bore you with their authorities or lack thereof around these issues, precisely partly to the reason, Katie, you said. Okay, so anyway, something to think about. We'll send out the slides. There's another set of slides that go into a little bit more detail. And then we'll send out a link to the whole strategy in case you want to read the 80-page document, which you probably don't. Okay.
Do you want to take us to public comment?
Yes. Okay. So we want to have time for public comment before we close. So if anybody online wants to do public comment,
Yep.
please, can people put up their hand if
Yep,
they're up?
we have 2 online.
Okay. So I'm going to go to Pamela first. Kind of keep it brief if you can, just because we're running out of time, but just state your name, affiliation, and your 3 minutes.
Thank you. Susanna Alpenroger for Morgan Friends. We've been designing boats for the glass since 1952. We're looking at a fleet for economic sustainability, safety. We noticed in 2002 June that some of the boats were hard, short, fat, not efficient altogether. Several much questions. Fishermen said to us, all these odd rules. When we did our homework, by the time we were done doing our research, we looked at the 405 pages of federal and state code, initiative strategy papers, the whole spiel. 9 cases against the industry, 9 cases where our elected get told things that aren't necessarily matching perhaps not. Because this whole edifice of fleet mismanagement is based on unscientific assumptions. Their assumption was from 1993, 1992 in committee, is you should define fishing permit by length. It's like on land defined with skin, eye shape balls, textures. It's absurd. It's terrible bigotry. You define fishing boats by load, by mass, by displacement. On some volume tonnage, on some fish hold, you go by weight, no horsepower. And then you have a free flow of ideas, long lean, submarines, whatever people want to do. They don't get any more fish, but they do get this money. So we have 32 years of no engagement with this chap. Meaning this establishment here, and then Massachusetts Fisheries Advisory Commission, and all of the previous iteration, all over the place, in Bedford, in Gloucester, never pushed back against this. If it takes 34 ounces of meat, fully documented, there's no polemics, a little bit of implications. There's treatment down to 11,700 days of us being told, you're not going to give you friends across the Canal, a modern boat, you won't make it. So what I'm doing here is to share with you a few moments of the consequences of this. The first step going with this one was we engaged in 2000. Spoke up in public before the council, March of 2003. That's 23 years, no matter what time. And then councils never allowed any conversation about this. What's happening? It's a big deal. And we finally found there's no core competence on so I'm not going to get the service things. And I have it in writing from being Kevin Stokesworth. We thought. Yes, somebody on the faculty who can tell you what a 20% of Massachusetts fishing fleet should look like to match EBFM, ecosystem-based fisheries management. He has one on the faculty. He doesn't have the resources to do this work. So it depends on us doing this. You know what? It's cost. Pro bono, for free. If you feel underpaid, talk to me about it. So this had many consequences. Massachusetts Municipal Harbor plans, the last 32 years, have never integrated this. So what are these things for? We started this conversation late February, early February 2020, before this came to be. Before that, as I said, we spoke March 2003. No feedback except on the newspaper. 60 local signatures, including Conservation Law Foundation, Ocean Alliance, we've got some NGOs, but primarily fishers who said we're gonna break with our fishing.
Be 3 minutes, so maybe just get to the point.
Yes, we are, just about the point. So these 60 local folks broke with what you think to be the fishing industry, Al, Angela, Guido, and friends, these good folks, well, decent folks, but they've never pushed back on this. That's historic fact. It may have legal consequences, not for us, but so to make this easier, rather than me, maybe for them, it's not fact. I brought 30 copies of 2 pieces. So 1 page that compresses everything, and then the 1,200 word piece that glossed 80 times, December 22nd, 2022. So I want to go through this 100 reasonably serious business. I left all the jargon out. And so I hope we thought.
Yeah, welcome to hand them out. That's great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. You bet. Thank you. We'll make sure all the commissioners get it. So, okay, good. Thank you. Okay, next up, we're going to go Patty, and you should be able to speak.
Yep.
Hi, thank you. Do you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Hi,
Got it.
thank you. And I'll try to keep it brief. Thank you to JJ Bartlett. I am on the Gloucester Fishermen's Wives Association, a present city councilor. I'm a representative for Mortallaro Lobster. I'm in the processing shipping industry, and I had a 30-year career with NOAA Fisheries. JJ Bartlett, I did not know about the all-encompassing services of the partnership. I think that needs to be more broadly acknowledged publicly. That was a good education for me. We understand about the land-based concerns and the regulations that drive these decisions, which do result in disasters. These regulations are, at this point, they're unsustainable. They're unsustainable. I speak with Jackie Odell on occasion. In our industry, we have health certs, NOAA health certs, that just sometimes don't work. The FDA used to handle these. Now NOAA has them. I tried to talk to inspection recently. It wasn't well received. What I think we need in the port, some of Vito's points, port infrastructure is failing us right now. We do need state and federal subsidies. My view is the state has invested in life sciences and tourism in our port, but very little, if anything, to fisheries or port infrastructure. That's a big need. We also need tech services, technical support services here, and some kind of liaison between us and the state and federal government. That seems to be one of our biggest problems. If we have an issue, we don't have access. We just can't really get to them in a viable manner. The federal government now through MAHA is looking at food as fish and seafood as protein, recommending higher portions of that per week. I think that that's a really strong piece we need to play on. And the Know Your Farmer program, Gloucester Fresh did some of that at a very small local level. That could be expanded, but the science, the fishermen have real-time science data that just isn't recognized by NOAA. I don't know how to solve these things. I'm bringing it up to you because we need this partnership, this better partnership. Maybe not with our state, but with our federal players. We're so federally regulated. In the economic sector, Mortallaro Lobster, they purchase about a third of that 4.3 million pounds landed in Gloucester, and we process over 40 million pounds a year. So we know about economic drivers and market conditions, which do need help. The processors drive a lot of this price problem, and the country of Canada supported their fishermen, their lobster industry heavily during COVID and after. So we need some of that support. I hope this perspective has at least been helpful. And the food protein avenue that isn't valued is incredibly important. So thank you for this time.
And Patty, can you just say your name one more time?
It's Patty Ann Page.
Thanks,
and
Patty.
I'm with the Gloucester Fishermen's Wives. I'm a city councilor. I represent Mortallaro Lobster, and I had a 30-year career, NOAA law enforcement, NOAA Fisheries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Valerie Nelson, you're up next and last. Valerie,
Yeah, I think I unmuted. Can you hear me?
we can hear you now. Perfect.
Good. I'll really try to be brief. I'm a Gloucester longtime fisheries advocate. Many of you know me. Just a couple points. I'm delighted to talk about economic development strategy. Let me just say politically to always remember how politics works, and that's not necessarily state figures and all of that. It's very localized in the legislature for sure, but even in the governor's office. They look at particular places and locations. So we know they care about Gloucester. They care about farming communities in the West. And that's your lens into what's the economy of Gloucester that Maura Healey should be defending. And we also know, as you know, that Maura Healey has a great affinity and affection for the fishermen and certainly for Gloucester after the Lily Jean. So politically, I would think about it in some different ways. I think this group is in a very strong position politically to go to EOED. Let me also say that there's been really what you would argue massive disinvestment by the state in the fishing industry in these ports. We all know that the state fish piers are in terrible shape. New Bedford closed down, et cetera. That on the DPA regulations, there's been consistent movement to allow tourism into and displacing fishing. And the state does know that tourism, which they have invested a huge amount of money in, they're the lowest paid seasonal workers. They're like at the bottom of the economy, and fishing and processing at least is in that solid missing middle class blue collar that the state needs to invest in. Finally, what I want to say is this is not rocket science. I think it's really worthwhile to look at a standard state economic development strategy and think about how it applies to fishing. Certainly, the state, like in clean tech, biotech, ed, they invest in infrastructure for sure to support that industry. We have the fish pier, we have private properties needing investment. They invest in supply chain investments. We have a little bit of food security grants, much more is warranted. And then the big one that I see the need for is that the state over and over invests in these other sectors in innovation centers, clusters, accelerators, incubators, because they recognize that an innovative economy, which the fishing industry has been, is now, and always will be, needs innovation cluster accelerator hubs, just like biotech and et cetera. And at such a center, clusters, and there's one already in New Bedford, but it should be having fishing in a big way as well. You've already mentioned in your meeting all the opportunities to focus on how to do green crab, new lobster products, flounder you were talking about. And as far as science go, I just read this morning that Steve Cadron is working on monkfish surveys that going to the council to supplement the federal work. I'm sure, Vito, you know a lot more about that, but I was struck by how that's a state role in a state university advancing the science. So just remember that the state does economic development. It just needs to use their same formula in the fishing industry, and things will flow as all of you have talked about. I think that it's also so important to point out that these ports you're talking about have a real privilege, if you think of it that way, that gateway cities that lost manufacturing, it's gone, all they maybe have is tourism, whatever. These ports you're talking about have a natural resource of great value, and the economy has to be invested in. There are the jobs there, the value-added products up the kazooie, more marketing, as everyone has said, with there's so much upside potential in economic development. It's related to the assets of your particular communities, and Maura Healey and EOED and the legislature need to understand this as tremendous innovation potential if you do the economic development strategies and stop disinvesting like in your state fish piers and allowing the DPAs to fold to tourism and things like that. So thank you very much for working on all this. And I think that you have a great case to make to the governor's office and the legislature. And one last thing is there is a bill in the Senate being discussed that is about farming and seafood, and possibly some of you could think about in that bill that's moving this spring to put some of these economic development ideas into that bill right now. So thank you very much.
Okay. No, did they cut me off? No, I heard you and they called on me and I started talking and then by the end. Well, what did you hear of what I said? Okay, but you heard me. Which means in the room they heard me. No, but also I think they had to cut it off. But they didn't cut me off midstream. Excellent. Yeah, and then you couldn't even talk to Galen. And then she goes on and on. I mean, she's just such a waste of breath. Oh, no, it's like, how could she do this to? Well, she probably put up her name first.